Hello everybody and welcome to the latest edition of the Royal Blue Podcast. My name is Joe Thomas, I'm the Echo's Everton FC correspondent, and alongside me we've got my colleague Connor O'Neill and the person I often call regular contributors, but been told that that's a little bit too formal and not really fair for you. So I've been given a few alternative suggestions, Gav. So do you want to choose, obviously Everton's foremost statistician, do you want to choose one of the following for your next introduction? You've got preeminent pundit, foremost fact man, the Goodison Guru, the Everton memory master, the brain Buckland, or the stat master? Any jumping out to you there?
All six, to be honest with you. They're just alternating, like rotation, Everton statistician will be all right, I don't want to say the pundit one,
No, I'm sorry.
Few would disagree with that, to be fair, preeminent pundits.
I'm sorry if I haven't done you such a disservice for the past few months. So
No, I can live with that, Joe. Yeah, it's great.
Right, well, we'll crack into it. Obviously, Everton beat Sporting on Saturday, last game of the pre-season. We're a couple of days out. We're recording on the Tuesday. Fulham just days away. Connor, Youssef Chermiti pretty much through the door. He isn't quite confirmed as we're talking, but bar any Arnaut Danjuma style U-turns or collapses, we think he will be an Everton player very, very shortly. Just in terms of, we'll do all the big pre-season prediction stuff on Friday, but having been there on Saturday at Goodison Park, having, as you did, obviously you spoke to Sean Dyche after the game, and you spoke to Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and just kind of having looked at the feedback since then, the response to that game and some of your pieces, where do you see Everton at this present moment in time?
I think it's a very difficult question to answer, because it's almost like you're watching two Evertons, in the sense of you're watching one with Dominic Calvert-Lewin, which you think if he's up front, leading the line, fit for the majority of games this season, Everton will be a different prospect to what we've seen over the last two seasons. If you're watching Everton without Dominic Calvert-Lewin, which we have done for a large part of this pre-season, you're a little bit sceptical to think of where Everton are right now in terms of, is it going to be enough to avoid the battle, to avoid the drop? I think it's almost like on Saturday we saw with that first half, which I think before the game we all thought was probably not too dissimilar to what we might see against Fulham this weekend. Obviously, Sean Dyche questioned that a little bit afterwards when he kind of suggested that Dominic Calvert-Lewin might not be fit enough to start, given he's only played 245 minutes.
I don't think anybody quite expects Ben Godfrey to be in the back four, do we?
No, maybe that was the only other change, but I think in terms of around about pair style and the way Everton set up is probably what we would expect, and I think it was quite promising. I think both sides had chances, etc., but the difference Dominic Calvert-Lewin makes up front is clear for all to see. But if we're looking at maybe like a Stoke performance, which obviously mean you were at the better 3-6-5, and wasn't great, I think we can all admit, and it was a bit alarming, a bit worrying. I think Everton, you're a little bit sceptical of Everton going into the season. So I think we're looking at now two different Evertons essentially. I don't think Youssef Chermiti will come straight in. I highly doubt that. I think it'd be a big ask for the 19-year-old to come in and start leading the line on the opening day of the season. Just simply because he's not doing any part of pre-season, and by the time they do get him over the line, you suspect this week, I suspect the thinking for Fulham will be well underway, and tactics and whatnot will be already be at an advanced stage. So I think in terms of where Everton are at now, it's all dependent, isn't it? We feel like we're always saying this, but it's all dependent on Dominic Calvert-Lewin. And I know we're only couple into this podcast already. We sound like a broken record in recent years, but that's the reality, isn't it? From what we've seen so far this summer, Everton are a different side with Dominic Calvert-Lewin leading the line. So if he's fit and he's available, you suspect Everton could be mid-table quite comfortably this season. If he's not, it's big pressure on Youssef Chermiti if Kevin Felwell and Sean Dyche don't manage to bring any other forwards in this summer. But I think we would all like to hope that at least a winger and another forward will arrive before the transfer window shuts.
You spoke to both Dyche and Calvert-Lewin, as I've already referenced. Having had that conversation with both of them, do you think Calvert-Lewin starts on Saturday?
No, because of what Sean Dyche said. Yeah. I think he thinks he can be...
You don't think he's playing games or anything like that? Because the one thing I thought a little bit, because obviously you said the same about Danjuma, and I think Danjuma is possibly a bit further ahead in where he thinks he is fitness-wise than Sean Dyche perhaps let on the other day. And part of me thinks that in this squad, in its current form, there aren't many tricks that Sean Dyche can play. There's a very obvious style of playing for Everton. And one of the few cards he's got up his sleeve is the idea of perhaps making the case that some of these players won't be involved, and then if Fulham rock up at Goodison Park on Saturday and all of a sudden Danjuma's on the left wing and Calvert-Lewin's up front, having spent 3 days preparing for something different, it's a big difference compared to, say, Mopé and Garner and Iwobi out wide, isn't it?
Yeah, and look, I think we'd all love to be surprised with me on Saturday if the team she dropped and Dominic Calvert-Lewin does start, because that means they've got a better chance of winning the game. It's as simple as that. I just thought the way Sean Dyche spoke about Dominic Calvert-Lewin after the game was that they're kind of maybe going to hold him back a little bit. I think he's clearly been following this games programme over the summer, which obviously started when he went the trip to Germany and looked to kind of build better foundations for his body. Dyche said that they weren't at the point in which he could maybe start games in terms of that games programme right now. So one suspects maybe especially I think given how Everton have treated Dominic Calvert-Lewin this pre-season, because obviously his first taste of action came against Monza in the behind closed doors game, and then the first chance we got to see him was on Saturday. Before that, Everton had played 4 games, 5 if you include Tranmere, so there was multiple opportunities for him to get game time. He didn't get any game time in them games because Everton chose to keep him back. So I just think, given what Sean Dyche said, I would be surprised if he is selected to lead the line, but it'd be good to have him on the bench to come on, certainly if that was what Sean Dyche chooses to do. Dom thinks he's fit. Speaking to Dom afterwards, he thinks he's fit. He thinks he's ready, and he was spoke with refreshing honesty. I think in terms of football, the difficulties he's faced and what he's been through, and I think it was really good, interesting insight into the trip to Germany and what I think can behind that and why he felt that was so important to do. But ultimately, Sean Dyche picks the team, and ultimately Sean Dyche said on Saturday evening that he doesn't think Dom is fit to play. So I would love to be surprised, but I think right now I would be, wouldn't be surprised if Dominic Calvert-Lewin starts Saturday's game on the bench.
Gav, if Dominic Calvert-Lewin doesn't start, and say Youssef Chermiti has come through the door, who are you starting up front? And I appreciate that it obviously sounds like a daft question, the fact that obviously Chermiti's probably had very little, he would have had very, very little time to work with his Everton side. I'm just trying to think who, if we're working on the basis of we're taking Sean Dyche, what he said there, no Danjuma, no Calvert-Lewin. We know that Dwight McNeil is out for at least a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, what's your attacking lineup there?
No Gray either.
No Gray either.
He has filled the role, hasn't he? Yeah.
Which is a really interesting one, actually. And maybe that's probably better to come on to at the minute.
But in terms of starting up front, all the roles lead to one player, don't they?
I think they do.
Isn't it, really?
So, yeah.
I can't see any other scenario that sort of fits, to be honest with you.
Pity's on Karen's injured.
Yeah.
Or being injured, sorry.
Yeah, and I just it's just got to go with that, haven't you, really, at the end of the day? I mean, I think Mopé starting and Calvert-Lewin on the bench is better. At least there's... I mean, Calvert-Lewin's got his, I'm not necessarily his biggest fan. There's sort of light at the end of the tunnel there, isn't there, suppose? So I think it's Mopé, isn't it, really? I can't see anything else. So when you ask Dyche about Calvert-Lewin on Saturday, he just press a tape recorder, did he? Just, here's my answer, and Mopé for me. And that might be unpalatable, but I think there's not exactly flush with options there, are we? No. Even wingers playing as strikers, we're not flush, are we? I can't see it to me to being available. It's going to take him a month or two, isn't it? Really, you would say, before he gets anywhere near fitness. But hopefully, we'll probably look at this at some point. We do need another striker, as we said before, haven't we? Yeah, well, that's going to be my next question. Obviously, if Chermiti comes through the door as we expect, then what becomes the priority for your next move in the transfer window? Gav, I'll start with you. Is it another striker that bridges the gap, say, between you Dominic, you want someone that can challenge and compete and act as back up for Dominic Calvert-Lewin, but also take the pressure off Chermiti coming in, having to do something extraordinary in his the very first steps of his career? Or are you actually moving on to a right winger or a centre back or something? I think the centre back is something we need to talk about at some point, because we saw it on Saturday. We say about Calvert-Lewin being indispensable. Well, actually, you'd argue that Tarkowski's just as indispensable, isn't he? When you look at the options, so I think centre back is something something worth looking at, definitely. But I think another striker on the basis that it's just caused us loads of problems. I'm not necessarily a fan of, when you look at the options, just getting somebody who's like Chermiti and Calvert-Lewin, so we've got like 3 6'4" strikers, who are we, Wimbledon in the mid-80s, I think you need something that is a bit different, but not too different that you've got to change the entire style of play of the team. So I think it'd be somebody who's sort of like, trying to think, like halfway between Maupay and Calvert-Lewin. If you know what I mean, something like that. I'd rather have that than 3 6'4" strikers in the 3 leading roles. Really, that's the profile I'd wish to see.
Connor, would that lead you to perhaps more? Obviously, a name that's emerged this week's Patson Daka. Would you be more likely to go down that kind of route where you've got somebody who is big, he is big and strong, but he's also very pacey, as opposed to, say, a Che Adams, who perhaps is more fits in that Everton system as it is, probably a little bit better?
I'm not against either of them, to be honest. I think either of them could come in and do a job. I mean, Che Adams is someone, obviously, we reported last week that there's interest there, and he's someone who's been attracted interest, I think, for a long time from Everton. You think back to last summer in January where there was links with him. Daka, I think, is someone who's not really hit the heights expected. I think it's safe to say that when he arrived at Leicester, it was a massive coup for them, and he was someone who's seen as an up-and-coming, promising, European talent. I don't think it's quite happened, but there's certainly potential and talent there. So I wouldn't be against either of them. I think Everton need a centre forward. They need someone who can come in who's proven, used to play in the Premier League, because Shamati might be a great emerging talent, but it's a big ask to come and lead the line. I mean, going back to Dom, but Dom spoke to himself at the weekend where he said, when I come back and play, I have a big role, an important role to play. I don't kind of get eased back into games, and when I play, I read the line by myself, and there's a lot. Basically saying there's a lot expected of me, and that's the same for any Everton forward. You think of Neil Maupay, you think of anyone who comes in, is Sims last season at times. Anyone who comes in for Everton has got to be able to lead the line and put a real shift in. I think Che Adams could do that. I think Patson Daka could do that. I think they're probably the right names of who we probably should be linked with right now, because if we're being realistic, the club haven't got the war chest that they once had to go out and just spend big. They're going to be a bit more astute. So I wouldn't be against either of them. But I do agree, I think, with Gavin, it's got to be a centre forward. I think, when you think, McNeil will soon be back fit, Danjuma, you suspect isn't too far away. You got Iwobi. I think James Garner can play up okay. He's not got the dynamic pace of maybe a natural winger, but I wouldn't have any groans if he was out wide at times this season if it meant Everton went and got another centre forward, because ultimately, like we've seen, goals change games, goals win games, and Everton haven't scored enough goals over the last 2 years to win games. And I think the stats last year were quite interesting defensively, and midfield they were around mid-table, not great, but around mid-table. But yeah, when it comes to goals, not only were they one of the lowest scorers, I think they were second lowest scorers in the Premier League, they were in the top 10 lowest scorers in the top 7 leagues in Europe. So the problem is scoring goals, and that's why Everton have got to get at least another centre forward in along with Shamati this summer, because they are the difference.
Having had the opportunity to watch him in action on the Saturday, have you seen anything which suggests to you that Victor Gyökeres wouldn't have been a brilliant signing this time last year, when he was perhaps a bit more attainable and Everton had a little bit more money, and Coventry were far less advanced in their own standing as they are now, having obviously ended up having an almost promotion winning season in the Championship?
They should have gambled last year. I mean, you spoke about this at length, didn't we, last week? Right. They should have gambled last year. They should have went from this summer. Obviously, I think he was a little bit
probably out of their reach
in the end.
Point, wasn't he? So.
But I did write on the Sunday analysis that, given what we saw against Everton on Saturday, he's a player who the club should still be looking at moving forward. I think if he goes to Portugal and blossoms and continues to score goals, there's no reason why further down the line Everton should be making a move for him, because he certainly showed on Saturday that he's got all the elements to be a top centre forward. I mean, he's only denied a goal by a great save by Jordan Pickford. He set 2 chances up. His turn of pace, he was strong, and yeah, it was one of the moments where you think another one who got away, basically, because he could have very easily filled the void that Everton have got. So yeah, I think he's one who Everton should continue to monitor and look at, because he's he was, for being on, superb at times, wasn't he, on Saturday? And
he was,
and
I think
the run around.
Yeah, there were genuine positives from Saturday's performance. I thought, and I thought Everton were good value for their win come the end of the game. But if we're being perfectly honest, the first half an hour with Sporting with a better side and probably should have been 2 or 3-0 up. And Gyökeres, he missed one chance, but he laid two on a platter, didn't he, for his teammates, for Goncalves, and I think it might be in the right back at the back post. really Sporting should have been well ahead, shouldn't they?
Yeah, and obviously, like we say, he was only denied himself by a great save by Jordan Pickford.
And there's no shame in that either, so let's be honest, Sporting are a good side, aren't they? I mean,
of course.
Quarterfinals,
they knocked Arsenal off the Europa League last year, didn't they?
Yeah, like that's not a dig at Everton or anything like that. This was Everton went into that game underdogs, really. I think, didn't they?
And like they've added, obviously, that team last year done extremely well, and they've added Victor Gyökeres to the forward line, so they've strengthened again. I thought he just showed, didn't he, that he's got all the elements to be a Premier League centre forward as well. I think was the big thing, because he was big and strong and he had a good turn of pace, and I think that's one thing we've learned over the years, isn't it, is that you can be a good European centre forward, but that doesn't necessarily mean you'll be a good Premier League centre forward. You see players have gone and scored goals in Holland or Spain, but then they come to the Premier League and they just can't cope with the physicality or can't cope with the pace of the games, etc. Whereas on Saturday he generally looks like, and let's face it, if he's gone and scored goals in the Championship, okay, people say it's the second tier, but the Championship's a tough league, and we spoke to me through the week about Tom Cannon Shamati in terms of, is scoring 3 goals in Portugal as impressive as scoring 8 goals in the Championship?
Yeah.
There are them factors to take into it, but Gyökeres certainly ticked every box, and the only issue I think now is that he's going to have a lot of clubs watching him.
Yeah,
I like your... For Everton, it could become beyond their reach.
I like your positivity, but if he goes there and does well off the back of a £20 million plus move, I'm interested to see how quickly how far you think Sean Dyche can take this Everton side, and how quickly.
He could very easily become a £50 million player, couldn't he? Put it this way.
Gav, you mentioned Demarai Gray there.
Yeah.
I mean, it does seem slightly peculiar that for all the... for all that we know that his future probably doesn't lie at Everton, and we could probably have seen that at the back end of last season, given the paucity of options Everton have going forward, and the fact that we know he's someone that could potentially do a degree of a job there, is a little bit strange to see him not involved at this stage, isn't it?
Very, very strange, isn't it? Obviously, I mean, there's talk of a move to Fulham, isn't it? Obviously, and possibly abroad. And I find that a bit baffling, because he has. I mean, his best displays for the last 12 months probably for us is when he played as a striker. He had to work hard, involve himself in the game a bit more, and the inkling you get there for is that he's going, and it's just a case of just sorting it out and just go for a fee. And whatever fee we get will be good business for us, I think. Considering we bought for 1.7 million. I know I've said before, haven't I, like that you can feasibly go on a free next year if there's an option there for another year, but it depends who's got the option, the player, the club, or the
club have the player.
Yeah. So I think it makes sense if he's got to go. We obviously need the cash, and what the club is saying is we'd rather have the cash now than play him for a couple of games. 2 or 3 games before the end of the transfer window. We want the cash now to invest in the transfer window. Is the only conclusion you can draw from that, really, and that's why he's not.
Is there
being
a danger, do you think, that in trying to play that game, end up in a situation where they're cutting off their nose to spite their face?
They're entering in a situation where they might get far lower for him at the end of August than what they would have done now,
and fewer points in the games that he misses.
Possibly, but you don't know. That's all theoretical. People said that last season. We threw away the first 5 games because Calvert-Lewin didn't play. Well, you can't say that, can you? You know what I mean?
No.
You can say we were weaker, but you can't say we threw it away. I mean, and I think the great thing is, to me, is we just want him to go, and we want the cash as soon as possible.
I do wonder with Gray, because Sean Dyche spoke about him on Saturday after the game. He said the reason he wasn't involved was because he come back late and he's not anywhere near the level of fitness to play. But I do wonder whether he will go to Fulham. But he'll go to Fulham next week
after the game. It does. That's a narrative that's quite a compelling one. To admit it, it's just a case of don't have him in the position where you can.
Because even if he's not fit, but he comes off the bench with 10 minutes to go, we all know what's going to happen, don't we?
Yeah.
We've all seen, but I don't know whether he will go to Fulham. But I think it's just it'll go. You wouldn't be surprised if by next Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon there's developments in terms of him going to Fulham. Yeah. It's just a case of not maybe want to risk him coming back to Horses so quick, and
I get that.
Or after the registration window.
I just wondering, would we get the same fee for him before the Fulham game as after?
Well,
you know what I mean? Is that a negotiation thing? Because Fulham said, well, if you're not going to sell him before we play on the opening day, we're going to offer you a slightly lower fee than what we would have done beforehand. Just one of them like little things.
It's either way, it's both ways. Isn't it? Maybe want to protect their asset and not want to,
And now that's probably why there's a reason being a delay. But you can just get the impression he's a cashable asset for the player I've said before, who this season just gone through our options. You've got some decent options out wide with Dan Juma and McNeil, and stuff. Who will be said even Garner like has played. He's got some decent options. He's a saleable asset of somebody who next season, if things go reasonably well for us, is going to spend most of it on the bench, isn't he? Yeah. And so therefore, get the cash. Yeah. And I think that's basically what's informing this chain of events really with him.
Yeah, it really is interesting. Connor, we touched on Tarkowski's injury, and we know that Dwight McNeil's out. We suspect that Dan Juma and Calvert-Lewin may not quite make the starting 11. Are Everton cursed?
You're only asking this now.
Do you think that Dyche has been unlucky? I mean, when you look at pre-season so far, do you think that he's done the best that he could with what he's got to get this team as ready as they can be for a first game of the season, and all of a sudden he's in a situation where potentially four of his first 11 are out injured? I mean, do you think it's just bad luck?
Yeah, I think it is a little bit.
Yeah,
I think it is a little bit. I mean, my uncle throws the bus now, but he said to me last week when he seen Dan Juma was picked up that knock on Friday, and he said to me on Saturday morning, "Where is it when they step out in that pitch at Finch Farm? Is the grass infected or something?" because why all our forward players get injured on? And I think it is just bad luck, isn't it? Because I mean, at the end of the day, McNeil was a tackle, wasn't it, against Stoke, which is pretty physical friendly, wasn't it?
The only thing I'd say with McNeil is, and it's easy to say these things with hindsight, but I mean, that was the fourth big tackle on him in that game. Yeah. And I've heard a few people kind of say it was a bruising game. I didn't think it was I didn't think Stoke were consistently bruising. They just seemed to be consistently bruising towards McNeil, which might have been a sign of just the fact that obviously there were times when he was one of the few players that seemed to be able to break through the lines and wriggle free of players. But I mean, there might have been an argument to suggest he could have come off a bit earlier because he was being targeted.
I think when it comes to look at the injuries though, it's like, McNeil, like I say, was in a game. Dan Juma just seemed a slight knock. He probably might be on the bench on Saturday, so he could be available. Tarkowski was a precaution by all accounts from Sean Dyche. He seems to be downplayed that quite a bit after the game. He was quite firm, and I say nothing serious, but we don't know until maybe on Thursday when he does a pre-match press conference. It didn't look good, did it, when Tarkowski went down? He was banging on the floor.
He's banging on the floor. He's obviously. I know we go down the cliches, but he's not someone who goes down easily, is he?
Like, you were looking at each other, kind of going, "Oh no, oh no," like. But we don't know, and obviously Calvert-Lewin is the reason Calvert-Lewin hasn't featured is as much to do with Dyche, I think, as anything else in how he's managed them. So I think he's just been it's unlucky, isn't it? I think it's bad luck. I think ultimately, Sean Dyche knew this was going to be a rough hand this summer in terms of incomings and recruitment. I think there has been a number of players who have tried to sign but ultimately failed to bring in for one reason or another. So I think in terms of injuries, it's just bad luck, but it just feels like that bad luck never ends, doesn't it? It just feels like, this is meant to be a new season, a fresh start, line in the sand, all the cliches that we love to say, and yet here we are, on eve at the new season, talking about people, doing jobs for the team and round pegs and square holes and whatnot. So I think it's unlucky, but it's luck that seemingly has evaded Everton over a period of time, not just in the last few weeks.
I suppose where you say it's perhaps less bad luck and more, there's a degree of poor planning, isn't there, and long-term recruitment issues in the sense that
some of it Sean Dyche inherited,
which Kevin Farwell largely inherited as well, where you have a squad that is kind of so threadbare that players are going to get injured and suspended throughout the season, don't you? So I mean, part of it is build some resilience into that squad so you can have a plan B, and Everton for so long and probably still don't have that plan B. And I think that's probably where we look back on last summer and at the start of that season, Everton didn't sacrifice the first 5 games of last season because obviously they expected Dominic Calvert-Lewin to be fit. It was a freak injury and they were very unfortunate, but what they hadn't done is, and I do think there's a degree to which Lampard and Fowler were unfortunate on this because they had a lot of holes to fill in that squad last summer. And you remember the Chelsea game, obviously there was no Dominic Calvert-Lewin, but Yerry Mina went off injured and Ben Godfrey went out injured both for months, and the only reason Everton were able to address their centre-back problem was because they'd reinforced in that area with Tarkowski and Cody incoming. But there is just that problem, isn't there, that you don't have that resilience built into the squad, and therefore you're always gambling on players being fit. And it does feel that going into this season, there might still be a few areas where they have to take that risk again.
I know we've been a bit lucky. They're not career-threatening injuries, though, aren't they? They're not knocks that will keep players out for a few games. So I'm not particularly concerned, but I think the general point, and we'll probably talk about this in the season preview, is what you're saying there. And you looked at the bench on Saturday. And there's not a lot on the bench, and the problem is not now. It's during the season, isn't it? We're in more bruising encounters,
longer games
and stuff like we've spoken about, which is obviously the top of the agenda at the moment. I'm not too worried that now it's at that stage of the season, where, and we all know, was it like 7 games in December, don't we? I think something like that. Ridiculous amount as ever. It's the threadbare nature of the squad doesn't concern me now. It does concern me now, but the impact of it, I think, will only be seen during the season, during mid-season.
Do you think, Gav? Do you think it'll take going into the season for us to see that, or do you think we might see it straight away? Because I think I've written a piece this morning about how Sean Dyche seems historically reluctant to make substitutes. He did it so at Burnley. He didn't like to change things. At Everton, he hasn't. I think he's made use of 49 out of a potential 90 substitutes, and those figures are inflated by kind of the changes that he made after games against Man United, City, Liverpool, Arsenal were already lost. You look back to some of those big games, the 2-2 draw at Leicester. He made one change, and that was because Coleman got stretchered off. You look at the Forest game, where it felt like Everton could have clung on to that win, but instead you see Forest bring 3 players on. If games is going to get to, we've already got 5 subs, you get to 100 minutes, all of a sudden you end up in a real situation where you almost have 2 different games within a game.
Yeah, we've spoken about this before,
How do Everton, with the squad that they have, because they're not going to go and sign 6 or 7 players this month, how do Everton survive in that world? Is fitness enough? Because we do suspect that they'll be one of the fitter sides of the league this season.
Well, there's 2 aspects of having a short, smaller squad, isn't it? It's the injuries and replacements, and as you say, the more ongoing one is the game, isn't it? Your options that you've got. I'm thinking though that we've got options out wide, haven't we? Mm-hmm. If everybody's fit, we've got options probably in midfield. If everybody's fit. So I'm not really. I think we can manage that, the substitutions bit. If it's somebody like a Tarkowski, like a McNeil, like, I don't want to make no names, probably put the mockers on them. Have a lengthy injury during the season. There's 3 or 4 players that are really crucial to us, aren't they? Calvert-Lewin, Tarkowski. I think Onana, I'd like to see somebody who's going to be Pickford, really crucial to us this year. And I think you don't want one of them.
But it sounds like you might be taking a degree of comfort from the versatility of, because Everton do have a lot of versatile players. Also, Ashley Young can play a lot of different roles. Yeah. Alex Iwobi, James Garner, they do have that in the squad.
Dan Juma can't he, as well? Yeah, that's what I mean. And so we have got a safe players in some positions, and we've got some versatility. So I think the substitutions we can manage. We are going to get knocks. We are going to get injuries, and you've only got to see like McNeil being out for a couple of games causes an issue.
1 or 2 bad injuries away from a real struggle, and as we've seen in the last few years, you almost have to anticipate that you are going to get 1 or 2 of those bad injuries. So,
absolutely, and that's what the concern I've got. I think we can manage the in-game stuff through fitness and through, I think that we've got versatile players, and we have got some spare players in some positions.
I think the big thing as well, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because you look at the bench on Saturday, I think there was 4 first teamers or 4 senior players, what you categorised them as, and the rest were, I think it was 2 goalkeepers and then the rest were kids. But then 4 or 5 kids, it's probably going to, not aid their development, is it? They're made to sit around for the season just to play a backup role and play Premier League 2 in case something happens or in case they need it. And it's a double-edged thing there, isn't it? Because some of them kids will probably benefit from going out and loan in the EFL and developing and gaining first team experience rather than sitting around playing Premier League 2 football again. But then basically having to be there just in case something happens. And I think that's where, again, you see how threadbare Everton's squad is, in the sense of, you wrote down the 20 senior players that they've got. Some, probably not in the thinking of Sean Dyche in terms of Gabama, Gomez, Delhi was, Sean said himself the weekend, is a million miles away from being in consideration. So then all of a sudden you have to use like Tyler Onyango, Mackenzie Hunt, kids are having to backfill basically, but then that age stops their development because they can't go out alone and gain, and you can't gauge and understand where they are in terms of their development as well. So that's where I think Everton really, feel the kind of the backlash of the poor recruitment and the lack of planning over the years, because them kids might be able to benefit from a loan, don't get the chance to go out on loan because they're going to have to stick around in case they're needed or called upon throughout the season.
Yeah, you'd like to think we get 3 more players in there, wouldn't you? Between now and the end of the transfer.
The target is to get Chimiti at the very least two more,
maybe 3. As you say, I think we all know centre half, striker, and a right winger would be ideal.
Centre forward and right winger definitely.
I think so. Absolutely.
Connor, I mean, Gav mentioned his name there. We'll wrap up now, but we'll finish on a positive, and that was from Saturday. Amadou Onana really was excellent, wasn't he? I think we've mentioned Everton had a slow start to the game and they could have been well behind after half an hour, but after that they kind of came into it and they were the better side against Sporting. I think we could all take some heart from that. And a big part of that was the progress that Onana made within that 90 minutes, wasn't it? He was dominant.
The thing for me was about half an hour in, wasn't it, where Everton had laboured a little bit in possession and had been second best, and he picked up the ball in his own half and just drove forward up the pitch, and in the end he was let down by his decision making because he opted to try and find Alex Iwobi, who then saw his cross cut out and she just had a shot at goal. Obviously he then has a shot at goal in the second half and it's the post, which really unlucky. It's still incredibly raw, and we still saw signs of his rawness and naivety on Saturday. You think of the rash challenge where he got booked, and the one where he got caught, I think, daydreaming, and gives the ball away in his own area and almost cost the side a chance. But we are now starting to see, I think, signs of where he can take the game by the scruff of the neck and be that powerhouse midfielder that we hoped that we bought last summer. I think, obviously when he come in, people were comparing him to Yaya Toure and people like that in terms of that ability to just drag your team up the pitch 25, 30 yards. We didn't really see that much last year, and obviously he had injury problems and, probably struggled in the sense of the change of manager and stuff and how things changed tactically. But on Saturday, I thought we saw real signs of that kind of almost that, responsibility of like, well, I'll drag the team up the pitch, I'll get us into their own half, and I'm going to drive forward with the ball. And if we start to see more of that, then you understand why these so-called big clubs are meant to be looking at him and monitoring him over the years, because, in terms of, I wrote this on in the analysis, if he fulfills his potential and Everton can fine-tune him over the next season, over this coming season, then they've got one hell of a player on their hands, because he's got all the attributes to be a top-class midfielder. We just need to see it on a regular basis.
Everton don't have many of these, but he could be a game changer, couldn't he?
Oh,
if he takes the next step in his development. If Everton can get 10 performances out of him this season, like they did in the home game against Arsenal, where he was magnificent, if they could get 10 of them, then they'll be in a lot better stead, won't they? I think, trying to find that consistency.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was when I was thinking of the squad, I was thinking, when you talk about like the squad to last year and thinking, well, there's players there who are now a year older. I was thinking like Tarkowski's in his early 30s, Garnagay's a year older, Gyökeres a year older, obviously Coleman's a year older, and you're thinking, we've got an aging squad. But the counter to that is you've got some younger players who are promising, who are going to develop. You would hope, you obviously passing in year on developing. Onana, McNeil's nowhere near his peak, is he?
James Garner's another one.
James Garner. So for every player, I think of this year old, you've got like players that you would think, we say compare the squad this time last year. That's at the age they were last year. This season, with the good pre-season staying fit, some of those younger players you would hope collectively will do more than what they did last season. I'm not just talking about Onana there either. I
mean, we'll probably discuss this more on Friday, but it feels like on and off the pitch, for a whole array of reasons, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Absolutely. For Everton, isn't there? They've just got to get through this season first and maintain their top flight status, haven't they? And then new stadium on the horizon, another bad year rolling off the FFP.
Well, our place
3 year rolling next year, and then there's the big opportunity, the real opportunity for Kevin Farwell and potentially Sean Dyche, obviously be out of contract next summer. So obviously that's another thing for later on this year, but. That'll be something that's really interesting to follow. Next summer's the summer that you can overhaul this squad, isn't it? I think.
But then it'd be nice, wouldn't it? Like what you say there in terms of Gav says, if you started to overhaul it, but with the crux of them players,
that's
like Onana,
there's a young
Dominic Calvert-Lewin,
positive core there that could be a core for the next 5 or 6 years, isn't
Jordan
there?
Pickford will still be around.
Yeah. I was thinking about that. You could have like this season, like Calvert-Lewin with Danjuma just playing behind him. Then like you got wide left McNeil, then Onana, James Garner, and a right winger, whoever that might be, a Wobie or something like that. That's a decent midfield and front six, isn't it, really, if you think about it, in terms of there's a lot of quality there and promise, and if you get that sort of line up on the pitch, in the majority of games, I think you're definitely right about the light being the end of the tunnel, really.
Yeah.
I think it shows that Kevin Fowler's actually doing a good job in difficult circumstances.
Yeah.
I think I said this a while ago. He's probably the right director of football at the wrong time.
Well, if you have a look, I'm conscious of time, but if you have a look at the recruitment since the start last summer and what we've done so far this summer and what we will do, I think you'll see a big sea change there to what we've done in the years preceding Thelwell. I think the players that have come in either
couldn't get any worse, could they?
Well, no, you could have probably done a better job, but you can see there's a logic to it, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Right, well, that's brilliant. We'll wrap it up there. Thanks very much for listening. We've been the Royal Blue Podcast. We hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll be back with you on Friday. Thank you.